welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. And yes, it is a porch podcast that unfortunately is a tad windy in the background, but we're doing okay. Will Ragatz, SI on Vikings, here with me on the porch, and it is a beautiful day to talk about some football. How you been, Will? How you doing?
Good. It's been a fun start to the season. I think obviously when J.J. McCarthy got hurt, that kind of put a damper on the whole outlook and a lot of the stuff we were talking about this summer. But I don't know that anybody outside of Kevin O'Connell saw that this Sam Darnold start coming. And I mean, the defense, there's a lot we can talk about. It's been a really intriguing start to the season for the Vikings.
I think the best place to start for us here is the question that everybody probably has on their minds, which is this going to keep working? And I don't have a good answer to that because over the years we have had things that fool you. We've had Case Keenum, who I thought was going to fall off the map in the second half of the season in 2017 and never did. And then we've had Dobbs Mania, which did indeed fall off the face of the earth pretty quickly after a couple of tough games. So what do you think? Sam Darnold, how do we figure it out? I think the question is more, how do we even go about having the conversation about where this is going to go with Sam Darnold?
Yeah, to me there are a lot of signs that, I don't think it's going to be smooth all year. I think there's going to be some ups and downs, but I'm not worried about this being a Dobbs thing where it just falls apart, because Josh Dobbs is a journeyman veteran and, he's got some skills, but he's probably destined to be a backup for the rest of his career, and maybe he'll start again at some point, but Sam Darnold has started a lot of games in the NFL and hasn't always gone well, but he's learned a lot. And he came into the league with the pedigree of being a top 3 draft pick and having all the arm talent in the world and the size and a lot of those prototypical traits. So that marriage with Kevin O'Connell that has gone so well thus far, to me, it looks like this could be sustainable. It's all going to be about his decision-making, of course, but I tend to feel like this is something that they can keep up, at least something close to what we've seen so far. And then, I mean, for me more broadly, like I suddenly think the floor of this team is maybe 9-8, and that might sound crazy given our expectations just a couple weeks ago before the season. But to me, the defense is what raises the floor. They're going to be in every game with this Brian Flores defense, these veterans, the versatility, the experience. And then it's all up to Sam Darnold to kind of determine the ceiling.
Well, the floor being 9-8 has to also mean that Sam Darnold remains healthy.
That includes health to Darnold and other key players like Justin Jefferson.
But another part of that, when we talk about which parts of Sam Darnold's start will keep going, which parts will not keep going. And I think the pass protection, as long as the tackles are healthy, can keep going. And there will be game wreckers who give them problems, especially on the interior, which we know they can't handle. But they got the best guy in the league out of the way in the first week in Dexter Lawrence. But Kenny Clark is still to come. There are other teams that have them, but not really to that caliber. And they survived getting beaten and getting some pressure with Sam Darnold. And then to play the way that they did against Nick Bosa and the 49ers pass rush, I think because of who the opponent is, that's where you start to talk about it being sustainable more than if it had been almost anybody else. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if this is the Detroit Lions, even if this is some division opponent or a halfway decent good team, the Tampa Bay Bucks, it's not the 49ers. I mean, they just bring in a little bit of a different aura to them, mm-hmm. and the amount of talent that they bring in to beat them that way and for him to play that way against them, that you are willing to take a much bigger leap out onto that, hey, maybe this could be good than you normally would be. I don't know how much that influences you, but I keep going back to the talent of the team that they just beat and saying that does matter a lot to me.
Yeah, and I mean, they almost won that game a lot more comfortably than they did had Aaron Jones not fumbled at the goal line. And you just mentioned Dexter Lawrence. And, I mean, the Vikings have probably survived 2 of the top 5 individual defensive performances in the league through 2 weeks from Dexter Lawrence and Fred Warner, who was just absolutely unbelievable in that game on Sunday. Aiden Hutchinson, I think, had 4.5 sacks, so he's got to be in there as well. But, I mean, that's 2 just unbelievable defensive performances that you were able to overcome and not let that completely wreck the game. And yeah, the offensive line, I think, what we've seen from these tackles, not just this year, but the last few years, is that they're going to be able to hold up even against the best of the best. And you got off to a really tough start. Even those Giants edge rushers are no slouches, and they completely took them out of the game. And Nick Bosa did what Nick Bosa is going to do, and he got home for a couple sacks, one of which was kind of a cleanup sack. But even this week, I mean, it's another really, really tough test against the Texans' defensive line. Daniel Hunter, Will Anderson, some other guys that they've got who were just all over Caleb Williams on Sunday night. But as long as the interior can hold up, and they have to be really encouraged by what they've seen from Blake Brandel so far at left guard, it's week to week going to come down to, I think, if that can continue, but also Garrett Bradbury and Ed Ingram. And Bradbury was much better in this game. Ingram was at least a little better than he was going against Dexter Lawrence in week 1. So if that can continue, I mean, the 49ers, as good as they are, only pressured Darnold. I think it was 9 of 31 dropbacks. If you can be around that rate, and that'll be tough to do against the Texans, but I mean, against most other teams, they don't have that kind of talent on the front. So if you can keep Darnold clean like that, I feel like with O'Connell running the show and game planning each week and the talent, that they're going to get back Jordan Addison and T.J. Hockenson at some point. Like, I don't see why this can't continue being a top 12 or so offense in the league.
The fact that they were able to lead that key drive without any of their top 3 wide receiving options, Jefferson, Addison, or T.J. Hockenson, that was maybe the most impressive thing Sam Darnold has done so far through these couple of games. Do you find Darnold to be interesting? And I don't mean interesting in his press conferences. He goes out of his way not to be, and I fully respect that.
Yeah.
I know that he does not want to throw anybody under the bus. He doesn't want to give some big quote that ends up all over the internet, and I respect that he is trying to be uninteresting. But as a quarterback in general, we always are attracted to the reclamation project or the clamation project. I don't know what the right use of that, but there's nothing to reclaim. I mean, he's never had a good career with any other team. So the fact that O'Connell has this opportunity and his connection to Darnold is probably more interesting than Darnold himself, who seems like a fairly straightforward type of person. But that might help him in this if he doesn't have emotional ups and downs and he's not flying off the handle. I just wonder what you think of the circumstance as far as how intriguing it is to follow along with somebody coming from where they came from to now have this opportunity to look like this.
Yeah, I think the quarterback journey phrase that Kevin O'Connell loves to use is really a fascinating one with Darnold. And you're right that he doesn't let us in super introspectively in his press conferences. He's a few times this year talked about how, playing quarterback, you can feel like the world's closing in on you, both on the field, off the field. How he's learned a lot over the course of his career, and I think the fact that he has looked the way he has, specifically, I think the poise and the confidence that. You never know what's going through somebody's head, but just body language-wise and the execution, the throws he's making, the decisions he's making, he looks confident. You don't throw that ball to Justin Jefferson. 2 weeks in a row, really, he's thrown a deep ball to Justin Jefferson standing on his own goal line. Mm-hmm. And that takes confidence. Like, to throw that back shoulder ball to Jalen Naylor, who's your new wide receiver 1 for this drive, where three defenders are there and it's third down, that's a confident throw, anticipation, and putting it where only Naylor can get it. So he has looked like he is ready for this moment, 27 years old. And it's also, like you touched on, fascinating the way that he is a vessel for Kevin O'Connell's offensive mind and his quarterback guru, and how, we both saw Kevin O'Connell getting a little emotional after the game on Sunday talking about Sam Darnold. You have to think that he's maybe thinking back to some of his own quarterback experience and quarterback journey, and just how happy he is that he and the Vikings infrastructure are able to provide this opportunity for Darnold to show who he can be. And he hasn't had that really throughout his career, and he's making the most of it right now.
Yeah, I think that you frame that really nicely, because I think about Sam Darnold's confidence, and I asked O'Connell about it, and he kind of wanted nothing to do with the question, which I understand why he doesn't really want to go there, because then once you start talking about his confidence, then you have to address what happened before, and nobody wants to talk about what happened before at all. It's just the here and now, and I get that and I respect that. But what happened before matters so much to what happens now and how we evaluate it and how we think about it and how we frame it. And Sam Darnold's confidence is a massive deal for his success, because I was going back and watching, as one does, some rookie tape from Sam Darnold with the New York Jets. And somebody described him, I think it was the quarterback tiers thing from not TEARS, but TIERS, for Mike Sando. And he was talking about some executive, jittery was the word that they used for Sam Darnold. Through 2 weeks, I have not seen or felt like there is a jittery version of Sam Darnold here with the Vikings. And what makes me think that is back foot, ball out. Like I've talked about this in camp. You know what this looks like. It's when something is going on time. It's guy drops back, does his hitch, throws the ball. And when that's happening and there's completions, you go, okay, something's good here. Mm-hmm. And when there's jittery, bouncing around, that's when you know something is wrong. And to hit so many throws as he has, and then also be pretty definitive when he decided to run, and pretty aggressive when he decided to run, that's where his confidence just seems like it's so high to me, and that's where it's showing up. Because I did want to look at a not confident Sam Darnold. That's why I was going back and saying, can I see a difference? And the answer is, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely, I could see the difference from other parts in his career.
Yeah, you're very right about that. Is one of the easiest ways for someone who doesn't know the play call, doesn't know the design, doesn't know all the intricacies of it, to measure confidence and measure the execution of an offense. Is, are you dropping back, getting to the top of your drop, maybe hitching once or twice, whatever the timing of the route concept is, and letting it rip? And that's tough when you're watching a TV copy with quarterbacks and you don't know, like, if they're pulling it down, is that because they're not decisive enough? Is that because nobody's open? What's the deal? But we watch so many of these young quarterbacks who are struggling, and it's like Bryce Young, Caleb Williams so far, I think Zach Wilson the last few years, and they get to the drop and they don't look decisive, and they don't look like they trust what they're seeing, and then they have to dance around a little bit and pull it down and try to run. And there was so much of that with Darnold early in his career as well, and we just haven't seen a lot of it so far, and that's a really, really encouraging sign. I think there's been a few balls in both games that he's kind of put in harm's way a little bit. There were a couple in this game. There was obviously the interception, which was a great play by Fred Warner. He had one that was kind of deflected in the end zone looking for Jalen Naylor. The other one early on where Justin Jefferson's head got yanked off and they didn't call it, but there were a couple defenders right there. But for the most part, it's been decisive. He's been going to his first or second read a lot, which is good. And then when he has to, he pulled down and he scrambled a few times in this game. And I think that's a real asset for the Vikings that Kirk Cousins pre or post Achilles did not bring as much. So it's been all positive for the most part for Darnold. Only one of the two interceptions he's thrown so far has really been his fault. And if he can keep being decisive and taking care of the ball, I think this Vikings offense is going to continue to be able to move the football, especially with their newfound run game.
Well, the newfound run game is something I want to talk to you about. But just with Darnold, I keep going back and forth a little bit with myself. Is this something that I want to happen or that I'm seeing happening? Which is important to assess, because we as analysts, as reporters, we want good stories. And with Sam Darnold, and I think that this did happen a little bit with Josh Dobbs, where it's like, gosh, this is such a good story. Yeah. And even if we saw some things that maybe might not work perfectly with Dobbs, and it is not a fair comparison, but it just happened. It's the most recent thing from last year and how quickly the wheels came off. And also, Sam Darnold is such a better fit as a quarterback than Dobbs. I think he would have had to have changed around his offense more for Dobbs to work with the scrambling element, where Sam Darnold's a pocket quarterback who can take off occasionally, but they're not having to implement some sort of Navy offense for the quarterback. It's really, you could just run what you want to run, and they were together for the entire time. So that's not really fair. But I do try to press the brakes a little bit at times and say, I've always been such a journeyman quarterback enjoyer. I mean, that's a bit on the show. I mean, but it's not a bit. It's so cool that Josh McCown's here. All those guys, those Ryan Fitzpatrick, friend Sage Rosenfels of the show, guys like that who fought to have careers and battled and found their way. They're great stories, and they're unique people. And I feel like we can get caught up a little, which leads me into this question. Try to check yourself a little bit on Darnold and tell me if it's not going to sustain, what happened. If it isn't going to be a week in and week out thing. 2-0 puts them in a position to fight for a playoff spot, but if it's not going to be week in and week out, and if it is going to go sour at points, if not way downhill, how would that have to happen?
I think it just would come back to, first of all, decision making, and I think maybe you start to see some balls continue to be he's thrown one interception each of the first 2 games. Again, only one really his fault, but some bad decisions where maybe he suddenly doesn't trust what he's seeing as much. I think Jordan Addison's absence lingering could be a factor, and I guess to me the biggest thing would be if it starts to go bad, like if he has a bad game this weekend against the Texans, which is entirely possible because of how good that defense is with DeMeco Ryans coaching it. Their front is incredible. Derek Stingley is a great corner. They got that rookie Kamari Lassiter who picked off Caleb Williams on Sunday, Jalen Petrie, the safety. Like, it's a really good defense. If he doesn't play well in that game, the confidence thing is going to be put to the test. And Kevin O'Connell talks about it a lot, like the culture. The culture thing that he talks about so much matters when there's adversity, and that's when it's really tested. I think the same is true for an individual player's confidence, especially a quarterback, especially someone like Sam Darnold, where you might start to think, oh, no, here we go again. And he's had good 2-3 game stretches before. I mean, even with the Jets, certainly with the Panthers, I think in 2021 and 22, he's had a couple solid stretches, and he just has never been able to sustain it for 4, 5, 6 games. So if it starts to go south, that's where it's really going to have to the poise and the confidence. Those are going to have to be there for him to be able to bounce back. And to his credit, in a even smaller sample within individual games, we've seen that he bounced back a couple times against the Giants, and he certainly did it against the 49ers in that drive when it's 20-14, and you don't have. I mean, you got Brandon Powell and Tristan Jackson and Trent Sherfield on the field. And I started to think, oh, they're losing 21-20. Like I think we all had that thought. And they faced 3 third downs, and he converted all of them. And so that was a really good example of Darnold, at least from the outside, did not seem to be feeling, oh, this is where it could go wrong, like getting a little jittery. And he has to be able to do that in a broader game-to-game sample if things start to get a little shaky, which they probably will at some point.
That's exactly what I was thinking about, and I thought about it many times throughout the Kirk years, and I thought about it last night as I was watching Kirk Cousins pull off a wild 2022 Vikings-ish victory against the Philadelphia Eagles. Definitely had some flashbacks there. Like, wait a minute, teams melting down and Kirk taking advantage at the end. Oh, where have I seen this before? But think about the way that Kirk Cousins was talked about this week by the national media and breaking down practice tape of him running bootlegs and talking about their offense, and he can't move, and he's dusted, and Penix has to play, and all these things, which I don't even think are crazy overreactions to what we saw in week 1. And Kirk Cousins comes out, and he plays well, and the other team makes a mistake, and he wins the game, and you go, that right there is his cheat code. That is the best thing of his entire game, other than he's an accurate passer, but he just seems to have this horse blinder thing that I respect so much. And I don't know if Sam Darnold has that, because that hasn't been the case in the past. But is it his confidence that fell apart after 3 or 4 games when he hit a downstride, or did his teams fall apart? Yeah. Was it injuries? Was it offensive line? Was it that schemes got figured out? Everybody was so high on Joe Brady for a minute there, and then all of a sudden, I think everyone figured that out. I don't know that they're going to figure out Kevin O'Connell, because we've seen him go through an entire season with a good offense before when he's had his starting quarterback. But that thing about his mentality and seeing how he deals with times that go down, because that's where he has stayed down over multiple weeks. And that's when, if he does struggle, you turn on the TV, someone's going to be saying same old Sam Darnold. Someone will say that if he has a bad game against the Houston Texans, and he has to be able to work his way through it. And I will tell you what can help him work his way through it. Well, first of all, the offensive line. It's been pretty good so far. The gentlemen, now gentlemen's, in the backfield, Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler. Do you believe that Kevin O'Connell has figured out how to run the football in the National Football League? Or do you think it's just been 2 pretty decent weeks, and who knows?
I tend to lean more towards the former. I think what we've seen looks repeatable from the Vikings. It hasn't been like juicing their yards per carry stats on huge plays. I think their longest run of the season was probably the 25-yarder that Ty Chandler had against the 49ers. And it's just both running backs have looked good. I think it's kind of a perfect thing that offenses love to have, where you have 2 guys who you can, maybe it's a 1A, 1B with Jones and Chandler, but Chandler being a little bit of a bigger back and showing now the sample size that we have from the stretch run of last season, and now what he did against the 49ers, ripping off 8 yards a carry. And it always hasn't made that much sense to me that the Vikings have been this bad at running the football, because you look at the personnel and you're like, all of these offensive linemen were drafted to run zone schemes, like, because they're athletic and they're good run blockers. Garrett Bradbury is one of the best at reaching defensive tackles and getting out in the second level. And Ed Ingram they drafted because he can do that. Christian Darrisaw is just a freak athlete in whatever he's doing. Brian O'Neill, like, that dude has like a 100th percentile 40-yard dash for an offensive lineman. Like, so does Bradbury. These guys, Ezra Cleveland's not here anymore, but he was in that mold too, where these are the ultimate athletes for the offensive line to run the wide zone and to get out there in space and make those blocks. So, and then they brought in Josh Oliver last year, who was like one of the best run blocking tight ends in the league. Johnny Munt can do it too a little bit, and they've got C.J. Ham. They have a fullback. Not that many teams still have a fullback, and so it was surprising to me, and that's told me that a lot of it came down to the running back, the player who was actually carrying the ball. And I just think that has been upgraded so much this year. Obviously, Aaron Jones didn't have a huge game again on the ground, at least. He had I think he led the team in receptions against the 49ers. But to have Jones, to have Chandler, you feel pretty good that at least one, if not both of those guys, is going to have a pretty efficient game any Sunday that you go out there with the blockers that the Vikings have. And I do think there's also something to your point of O'Connell's in year 3 now as the head coach, as the offensive play caller, and kind of figuring out what works and what doesn't from a run game standpoint. And it looks good so far. We'll see if they can keep it up.
There was a play in particular that I was really impressed by when Ty Chandler was in the game in that big, long 14-play drive, and he just ran for a first down. They put Josh Oliver over there, and then it was Darrisaw and Brandel, and they just eliminated everything in their path.
Yeah.
And I think that the combination between Christian Darrisaw and Blake Brandel is so much meat. It's so much human. These are 2 of the biggest dudes.
Brandel's massive, yeah.
Literally 2 of the biggest dudes on earth.
Yeah.
And you're talking 6'6". He was a tackle at Oregon State. I wondered about would he really be able to run block because he's so tall, but he's also so wide. He actually reminds me of kind of Rashad Hill. Remember him with like the big wide shoulders? And then Christian Darrisaw, you know how big he is. And then adding Oliver to that is a 270-pound dude that is darn near an offensive lineman in general. And I don't think too many teams are built to face that much man. I really don't. Like that many linebackers, that many defensive tackles that they're going to put in the game. And they had another one that was similar to that in the first game that Aaron Jones had a big explosive off of. You have to run to the right just enough to be able to set up running behind those 2 guys. But that, I think, is the part where I would say it is a little more sustainable, because you are talking about so much size and run blocking ability. And look, they bought into Brandel from the beginning. It seemed they were all in on this guy's going to be our left guard, and it has paid off, especially in the run game. That is a major part of it. Having 2 guys that can do it is a part of it. And I'm not ready to fully declare sorry, Alexander Madison, it was you, but
Yeah.
to some extent, and Reisner, Reisner isn't the greatest run blocker, so
Yeah.
maybe Ingram's a little better there. I think that it all ties back into Darnold, and it all has to play into Darnold's success. So it can't have a game where they just get eliminated in the run game, because I think that's been a major reason why he's been able to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just such an important thing for any team. I mean, last night, the Falcons, I think what really helped Kirk was how efficiently they were able to run the ball from under center with Bijan Robinson, and that opened a lot of things up for them through the air later in the game. And it's been the same way for the Vikings. There was another run. I was watching some of the tape, and Garrett Bradbury and Blake Brandel had a combo block on this defensive tackle and just drove him 6 yards out of the play, and Ty Chandler burst up the middle for 10 yards or whatever it was. And I think the Reisner point matters too, because he was a huge upgrade over the Ed Ingram or whoever Barr at Ezra Cleveland as a pass protector. But the run game stuff, I got the sense just from watching the film at times and from hearing other people talk about it, his run blocking wasn't a major strength, and that can be, like with pass protection, that can be kind of a weak link thing, where if one guy's not really doing well in that area, it can be tough for everybody else to kind of open up those holes. And I think everybody's been on the same page this year. What they've been doing really well is opening holes and giving the running backs choices. And I think both Chandler and Jones bring a lot of vision to the position where they're going to know if it's a stretch run, I got to be patient on this so I can cut back into the hole, or this is when it's time for me to bounce it. And they both have the speed and the burst to bounce those runs to the outside. We saw Jones do that several times in the opener. The big Ty Chandler 25-yard run, he bounced to the outside. He got a nice block from Jalen Naylor. And they both have that burst. They have the vision, and they just I don't know that it's going to be one of the best running games in the league, but if you can just be decent in that area and continue what they've done these first 2 weeks, that would be such a massive improvement from basically abandoning the run game entirely over the last 2 seasons because it was so inefficient.
Where do you think the defense is going to rank at the end of the 2024 National Football League season presented by Roger Goodell?
That is something I've been thinking about because I don't want to get carried away on this defense, but I'm so tempted to get carried away on this defense because
number one, baby.
The names, I mean, you just go up and down the line, and all of their additions. Is there a single player that they brought in this offseason who hasn't played well so far? I think Shaq Griffin's just been fine, but everybody else, I mean, nobody's thrown at Stephon Gilmore. The three dudes who they signed early, Cashman, Grenard, Van Ginkel, basically the Hunter, Wanham, Jordan Hicks replacement trio have been incredible, and more than I even anticipated in the most optimistic outlook so far. And it's still early, but man, this defense was 11th in defensive DVOA last year, in year one under Flores. Right now they're second through 2 games, which is such a small sample size that it doesn't really matter. But I think they probably finished top 6, top 7. I don't think that's at all crazy to say because of how many playmakers they have. And yes, they gave up over 400 yards of offense against the 49ers. That is the 49ers, who do that to most teams. But it's just been the consistency of kind of havoc plays, like tackles for loss or no gain, pass breakups, sacks, takeaways. They've done that a lot, and it hasn't been just one guy. It's been up and down the roster. I mean, Jihad Ward is I think he's second on the team in pressures. All these dudes they've brought in have just fit in so nicely and hit the ground running and have made so much sense for what Brian Flores wants to do. So it's not going to be perfect. I think C.J. Stroud is going to be a arguably tougher challenge than the 49ers just because of how special I think he is as a quarterback. But I don't know. I don't think I'm getting carried away to say that this looks like a pretty clear-cut top 10 defense with a chance to be top 5.
It does. There's going to be challenges that are on the way
For
that
sure.
give us a clearer picture about that because I can't help but think about how none of the weaknesses have really been exposed. And what I'll say about DVOA, though, is it's the Football Outsider stat. Aaron Schatz invented it. And what it's supposed to do is tell you that 400 yards was kind of bogus.
Mm-hmm.
You're ahead in the game. They're trailing the whole time. And, of course, you're going to give up yards when you're trailing because you're fine with a 15-yard completion if it runs 30 seconds off the clock, which is what they were doing late in the game. So even that stat, they were able to hold them from doing anything special when the game was really close, and they were able to make a lot of key plays at key times. But if you talk about their upcoming opponents, it's a lot of very good quarterbacks. Or do you think Jordan Love's going to be back yet? I don't really know.
I lean towards I think there was a Ian Rappaport thing that was like he's aiming for week 5.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll see.
We'll see.
But that even Matt LaFleur is still very dangerous, as he showed this week. So as you go forward, though, let's even assume that Jordan Love is out. You're still talking about this week is Stroud. Then after that, we'll see with the Packers offense, but it's a good offense. Aaron Rodgers after that. We'll see what his Achilles looks like, but he looked okay in these first couple games and could get stronger. Then you go Jared Goff, then you go Matthew Stafford. That stretch right there will tell us what we need to know. And if they are still considered a top defense after that stretch, after that, it certainly opens up because then you're talking about rookie Caleb Williams, who does not look ready for this. Yeah. You're talking about Trevor Lawrence, who's still struggling.
Richardson,
Will Levis.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, you are looking at something completely different where they could get into a groove week in and week out. Is there a weakness you're concerned about? Folks, US Cellular noticed that the way we use our phones has gotten to be ironic. We try to put our phones down for dinner, but the menu is on a QR code. That's ironic. We hit like on social media posts that we don't actually like. Ironic. Which is why US Cellular has created Us Mode to help us reconnect with each other and use our phones less ironically. A phone company wanting people to use their phones less? Ironic. Let's find us again with Us Mode from US Cellular. Visit uscellular.com/built-for-us to get started.
I don't know. I think the run defense was a little bit maybe alarming against the 49ers. And it might just be that that's a really, really good team at running the ball with Kyle Shanahan and Trent Williams, George Kittle, Kyle Juszczyk. I thought Jordan Mason was super impressive.
What a beast. I called him Marshawn Mason in my article.
The first guy almost never took him down, and that was a very impressive performance by him. But I want to see more, I think, from the run defense. And, they've got Harrison Phillips up front, but the defensive tackle position coming into the year was you could point to as probably the most obvious weakness just from a roster on paper perspective. And the fact that I think Tillery's been solid so far. Bullard is still kind of just a guy, and I think he had consecutive offside penalties in that game. But they've even gotten some good stuff from Taki Taimani, and we'll see if maybe Levi Drake Rodriguez gets off the healthy scratch list at some point. But that to me it remains kind of an unknown area where I need to see more. I really do think Ivan Pace and Blake Cashman are quite the duo at inside linebacker, and so that's encouraging as far as the run defense goes. But yeah, the fact that the 49ers were able to move the ball to the extent that they did, I think the Vikings themselves will tell you defensively that there are some things that they'll want to clean up there. There were some times where Deebo Samuel or George Kittle or whoever were pretty open. But for the most part, Brian Flores' schemes just – Brock Purdy said it after the game. The scheme is crazy. They have 8 guys at the line of scrimmage and double mug A-gap look, and then they drop into some cover 2 or cover 4 or just all these different crazy things they do that disguise things and make the picture muddy, like Kirk Cousins once said. It looks sustainable to me, and we'll see. I'm sure some weaknesses will pop up. I don't think anybody since the start of the season has really gotten hurt defensively. Maybe Dallas Turner. But Dallas Turner doesn't look like he might be a luxury this year if he plays well. If Pat Jones is able to kind of keep doing this in a contract year, not getting 2 sacks every game, but being reliable as the number 3 outside linebacker. So they have to stay healthy. But once you get past the 49ers and the Texans, you're going to get the Lions and Ben Johnson's offense a couple times, but that's 2 of the toughest tests of the season is what we just saw and what we're about to see this weekend.
Sorry, suddenly the sun went behind a cloud and the wind whipped up there. So that's such as things we face. Adversity on a porch podcast, so hopefully that sounds okay for everybody. But as far as the defense goes, I think we're still in find out a little bit mode.
Yeah.
And health is going to be a big issue. I think really the health comes down to the cornerback position, where if you needed at linebacker to play Kamu Grugier-Hill for a couple games, I think you're okay. At defensive tackle, now that Taki Taimani has kind of emerged as someone they could play, Jonah Williams, they have some depth there of just guys who could handle the position.
Mm-hmm.
Corner is not a spot that they have guys who can handle the position. I mean, we saw with the Caleb Evans last year that teams will take advantage of him. Fabian Morrow's behind him, but he's been a healthy scratch, so clearly they would prefer a Caleb Evans get in instead of Fabian Morrow. That means you're really at a point where you need Stephon Gilmore, you need even Shaq Griffin, and I think Byron Murphy's been okay through his first couple of games, at least serviceable as he's mostly been since he's been here. But the next step down, especially the nickel corner position, there is no one who can play nickel outside of, really, it's Josh Metellus if Byron Murphy were to get hurt. So keeping an eye on the health of this defense, which right now looks extremely good, but that's where I wonder, that's where last year they did hit some bumps.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, in that vein, and I think I know who your answer is from what you just said, but who would be the one player that they most can't afford to have get hurt on defense? Is it Stephon Gilmore?
I think it might be Stephon Gilmore just because of what the next level down is, but I also was tempted to say Andrew Van Ginkel.
I was thinking Van Ginkel and Grenard as well, because just the unprovenness of Turner and how I'm not sure that we're going to continue to see this from Pat Jones and how important the outside linebacker position is.
I had Patrick Jones at 36 sacks this year. I don't know if that's that on pace for. That's like when someone hits 3 homers in the first 2 games or something.
I think it's 34.
Well, sorry. Yeah, whatever.
36 after the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's what I meant. I was including preseason sacks.
There you go.
I don't think he played in the preseason. It doesn't matter. You went to a better college than I did. Anyway, here's what I want to ask you. I want to do a little better or worse.
Okay.
I'm going to give you some other teams in the National Football League presented by Roger Goodell and his referees that call penalties when someone does a celebration still. I can't believe we're doing that in 2024, and it was irritating to watch. But anyway, I want to give you other NFC teams, and I want you to tell me whether you think the Vikings are better or worse than that team. And I am not allowing you to say, I think they're the same. Okay? San Francisco 49ers. Do you think that they are, after beating them, a better team this year? And the whole idea is better record, better potential to win the Super Bowl than the 49ers.
No, I don't. With assuming that they get Christian McCaffrey back at some point, I think that's a better football team still. And you know, it didn't look like it for much of the game, but it was in Minneapolis. I do think the McCaffrey thing really matters more than any other running back in the NFL. So I will still give the nod to the defending NFC champions.
How about the New Orleans Saints, who have pounded their first 2 opponents?
You know what I was just thinking about recently? If you go on like NFL Twitter, Saints Twitter, I was just kind of popped onto my feed. They love Clint Kubiak, and why wouldn't you? He's modernized their offense. They're actually using motion and play action and all these cool things now, and they've scored 40 plus in 2 straight games. They just absolutely torched Mike Zimmer, and I was thinking back, like, what a shift in perception that is, because Vikings Twitter hated Clint Kubiak in, what was it, 2021 was his coordinator season.
If we could only find the person responsible for Clint Kubiak being now better.
Mike Zimmer, the guy he just destroyed on Sunday. I searched my own Twitter handle, which is at Will Ragatz, by the way, and then the name Clint Kubiak, and I had some tweet from the end of the 21 season where I was like, Clint Kubiak is terrible. This is not working. And everyone in the comments was agreeing, like, yeah, he's got to go. And he did go, predictably. But credit to him. And I had another tweet that was like, he had gotten interviewed for some job. I think maybe it was with the Broncos and Hackett or something, or the Jets. I don't even remember. But I was like, good for Clint Kubiak. I'm curious to see how his career goes now that he's no longer with Mike Zimmer. And boy, it has gone really well for Clint Kubiak. And so that's just been an interesting anecdote. I'll be excited to continue to see if the Saints can keep it up. I still haven't answered the question, though. I think the Vikings are better than the Saints.
I'm not sure. That one. So I said that you can't say the same. I want to say the same, which is
you can't.
Which is Derek Carr is also a guy through his career who's gotten blazing hot at times, and then always tended to regress a little bit. So I don't want to go fully into, oh my gosh, the Saints are Super Bowl contenders, but they certainly looked like it through the first 2 weeks. And their win, as impressive as the Vikings was, theirs was even more impressive over a team that I do consider a Super Bowl contender. And I'm
wondering about. Is Dallas not as good as we thought? Because one of the 2 data points for the Saints is against, by far, the worst team in the league, the Carolina Panthers. So I don't know. If Dallas is actually good, then that is an unbelievable ass kicking by the New Orleans Saints. But I'm now a little bit like, which way was it in that game? Was that the Saints being dominant, or was that the Cowboys having some issues?
So I think it was probably the Cowboys having issues, but I don't want to downplay that the Saints might be pretty good. I think the way the Saints have played and how much they beat their opponent by, I might give them the slight edge. Also, Derek Carr has been a good quarterback for a long time. Sam Darnold has been a good quarterback the last 2 games, and those are 2 different things for me, is trying to pick which team is better. So I probably would lean Saints by a little bit, but if we say Vikings or Cowboys, I'm still going to go Cowboys here.
Okay.
Because I don't want to overreact to week 2. This is the difficult thing, is we're saying, well, all these Vikings things from 2 weeks are sustainable, but I also want to go, maybe they just laid an egg in that game and they weren't ready for what they were going to throw at them. Maybe Zimmer thought Clint Kubiak was running the 2021 offense. If Clint Kubiak was allowed to cook in 2021, do the Vikings just go deep in the playoffs? I mean, that was a very talented team. That's what got them fired, is that there was so much talent across the board, and Clint Kubiak is being told to run the ball over and over and over again and just seemed to not have any confidence in his second half play calling. I'm sorry to circle back to that, but it's so astounding to see someone have such a great performance. I still would not say the Vikings are better than the Cowboys yet.
I think I'll give it to the Cowboys as well, but I'm another week of a Vikings win and a Cowboys loss away from flipping it. I just think that, like you said, I think we give them the track record. Dak Prescott was really, really good last year. They still have all the pieces on defense with Parsons and Diggs and all those guys. So I'll still give the Cowboys that for now.
Okay, what would be the team that you would have the Vikings over that maybe would be unexpected? I mean, because I was thinking about, we could run down all these teams. Seattle might be a shade better than the Vikings, but similar in the way that they have,
I think the clear-cut ones that are above the Vikings, I just gave it to the 49ers and we gave the Cowboys. I think we still put the Eagles and the Lions above the Vikings as well. But I think those are the only clear-cut ones. The conversations are the Saints, the Buccaneers, who have looked really good and have such a parallel of the highly drafted 2018 quarterback who's on his 4th team and is now just blossoming. 2024 Baker Mayfield, is what, if J.J. McCarthy didn't exist, the Vikings would hope 2025 Sam Darnold could turn into. And then, the Seahawks, the Jordan Love Packers, if he's healthy. I think you can really have debates with all of those, and that's in that 5 to 7, 5 to 8 wild card team range, where to me suddenly that's my expectation for the Vikings, is to be right in this playoff picture. I would probably put the Vikings over most of those teams. I think I put them over Seattle. I put them over the Saints, I believe. Yeah, I said that 2 minutes ago. The toughest ones for me, I think, would be Tampa and a healthy Green Bay, and I think I might give the nod to those teams over the Vikings, but it's close.
Yeah, I mean, even with Baker Mayfield, he's talked about as the same way as Darnold. He's lumped into that, but he's had much more success.
He had success with the Browns.
Yeah.
He was not a disaster.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. He took the Browns to the playoffs. He won a playoff game. So it's not totally mind-blowing that he would be able to do this and then sustain it. He's got a good team, has a good defensive coach. There's a cluster. They're in the cluster. Yeah. It's a second-tier cluster right now, and if they beat the Texans, I'm ready to put them in the first-tier cluster ahead of a bunch of other teams. Let me throw one factor that the Vikings have going for them at you before we call it a porch pod. It's been very nice out here, by the way.
Beautiful. It feels lovely.
Beautiful September day. The Vikings have this no one believed in us thing that's real because no one did.
It's true.
Whereas Philadelphia, can you not see it all over everybody's face, the pressure that is facing Nick Sirianni? And with Dallas, same kind of deal. If you don't do it this year, well, Dak Prescott's about to make $60 million. I don't know how you're doing it in the future if you can't do it this year. There's other teams that are coming in the future, maybe Washington, maybe Chicago, down the road if their quarterbacks end up clicking. And there's a couple of teams that have, I feel like San Francisco is even one of them as well, so much pressure on them and Detroit is the same way. If you don't win this year and you're Detroit, then everyone's going to go, oh, man, we missed our chance with that freaking fourth down that Dan Campbell called. This is a Vikings team that doesn't feel any of that because the discussion was mostly out for another year, and I wonder how that factors in to the rest of the year where it's belief in themselves could just grow and grow, and maybe they can be the surprise kind of Detroit Lions team that they were last year. Maybe not quite to that extent, but there's something that matters there with the outside forces beyond just who are your linebackers, who's your quarterback, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I always wonder how much, the narratives and the stuff that we talk about matters inside a locker room. I think this team has believed in themselves, really, since they started building it in the spring. They've said that over and over, and I tend to believe it. But it doesn't hurt to have some of that bulletin board material and have that chip on your shoulder and that nobody believes in us. Let's go prove it each week. They at least the way we've looked at it and the country looked at it, Vikings weren't expected to do anything this year. McCarthy went down and it's like, oh, Darnold's got to play. And it's almost like they're just kind of playing with house money and they can play free and go out there. And over time, if they keep winning, the expectations will rise and maybe the pressure rises. But again, I don't know how much that matters on a specific Sunday with the teams going out there and so much of the focus is on, X's and O's and the game plan and winning your assignment and just winning a football game. But yeah, to me, the biggest thing the Vikings have going for them, and this is beyond even what I think is a really talented roster, it's just the coaching. I don't know that another team in football has a coaching duo on the level of Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores. And there's probably there's definitely a few that are at least in that conversation. But I think O'Connell's one of the best offensive coaches in football. Game plans, play calls. He probably shouldn't dial up a Ty Chandler pass in the red zone of a one-score game and 4 minutes left. That was a little bizarre. But I think he's great at what he does, and then I think the quarterback element as well of just coaching that position. And then Brian Flores, I think, is pretty clearly a top 5 defensive coach, and just again game plans, schemes, complexity, play calling. That's a big reason why I think the Vikings floor is pretty high this year. I think they're going to be in basically every game.
We will see. Oh, man, it has set up the 2 wins, though, have set up for discussions that I wasn't even necessarily mentally ready for because I thought they would beat the Giants. And I said last week, well, nothing really changes, but it's good to whoop somebody. But this was going to be such a much better measuring stick, and they went past the measuring stick and went to not only did you play with San Francisco, which I still would have thought was a really good sign, but you ran over San Francisco and played their style of a physical and violent game, which also is a product of the players that Brian Flores has brought in. And he even said today, talked about how they got together in the offseason, collaborated on their picks for who they wanted in free agency, and were able to bring in so many guys that just fit exactly what he wants, that I agree with that. As long as you have good coaching, you should be in it. going forward, which should make some very exciting times for us,
Yeah.
I think, and Vikings fans as go forward.
And it's really fun that they don't, like, it doesn't let up this week.
Yeah.
You don't
yeah.
go,
Definitely not.
We just beat the 49ers, now we get the Bears at home. No, you got the Houston Texans, who look like a very, very, very good football team. Granted, they beat the Colts by 2 and the Bears by 6, which aren't the most impressive results, but just you watch them play, and that's a team that's going to give you a lot of problems this week. Stroud and Nico Collins on offense, the other weapons that they have, and we get to talk all kinds of revenge games.
Oh,
with
yeah, the revenge games
Danielle
are
Hunter
everywhere,
and
yeah.
Diggs and Grenard and Blake Cashman, I mean, up and down. And then defensively, like, they just have they look like the Vikings in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Defensive, they just have dudes on dudes on dudes, depth, versatility, pressure. So yeah,
And a great coach. I think
and
a really
great
coach.
Great
Yep.
coach. I'm on both sides of the ball. I think Slowick's good on offense, and D'Amico Ryans, who I would have fully endorsed the Vikings hiring him a couple years ago. I think he's a great coach. It's going to be another fun one, and if they can win that, I mean, it just continues to the bandwagon is just going to start to continue to grow here a little bit.
Yeah, to have them matching up with a team like this and not feel like they are overwhelmed and should be major underdogs, even just go back and look what people thought for percentage chances to win these games or opening lines for these types of games. I imagine that's changed a lot just over these 2
And
weeks.
they're home underdogs again. They get to point to that in the locker room and get fired up about.
Will, I'm fired up about the fact that you were able to stop by the porch.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming over, man. This was great. Beautiful day. And hopefully everything worked out for everybody listening-wise, because it worked out great for us chilling here on the porch. So thanks so much, everybody, for listening / watching, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Football, Will.
Football.
Yeah, I was going to say, man,
Football.
say it. Say it.
We're back.
We're back.